and welcome to Complete and Cast, the official podcast of Complete and Box Video Games. I'm your host, Spencer, and today in episode 22, we have a first. We have our first. Yeah, I know.
I was like, I was already on.
The guest Parker Parker Lindstrom here made a face like, well, a first. Not the first time you're hearing from Parker, but the first time in episode 22 that we're doing video game reviews. Now, this is probably
it's a good place to start for the very first review.
This is probably an aside, and I'm not going to go crazy into it, but anyone who's decently into the gaming community, and probably anyone who's taking the time to listen to this, knows that reviews in video games have kind of gone on a downward spiral over the last couple years. It's hard to tell when exactly how good something is because you don't know what's paid review and what's not paid. There's the famous ones where there's a game where it gets an 8.75 out of 10 and then the tagline is "It's okay." I think that happened to Borderlands, the pre-sequel, where it was like 8.5 out of 10, it's okay. And, it's just like, wow, 8.5 to me sounds really good.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so it's just one of those things where I have a bit, there's some still good reviews out there. Metacritic does a good job of getting them all together, all the aggregate scores. But there's a lot of individual reviews that I'm not a huge fan of. So, I'm not going to go through this on every different one, but since this is our very first game review, the two major problems that I have with game reviews nowadays would be, one, a lot of times these games aren't really, judged on their own merit. They're based on other stuff, so you wouldn't do Battlefield 3 without being like, well, Call of Duty, blah, blah, blah. And it's very tough. I totally get it. We will, today we're doing Resident Evil 5. We will be mentioning other Resident Evil games, but we're basing our scores and all that stuff on what Resident Evil 5 is. I don't care what 3 was or 1 was. 1 could be the best game of all time. That doesn't mean that 5 is automatically, terrible.
Right. And
the second one, my second major problem is a lot of times these tasks are given to people who aren't very, I don't want to say knowledgeable, but not it's not their type of games. A great example, we did adventure games in a past episode. If you gave me a newer, very hard adventure game to me to play, I would get so annoyed because I'm just not very good at them, and I would grade it bad. Whereas that's a game you want to give to Parker, or like an old school Resident Evil game you want to give to me because it's
I would get angry.
I'm good at them. I like them. I've played a lot of them, so this is my expertise. GamePro back in the day, I was mentioning to Parker, had different guys that did different things. Like you had Major Mike that did action games and all that kind of stuff. So when we do a review, in general, it's going to be something that I like. I'm not going to review something new that's out just because it's new. I'll review something because I like it. So you might see some old reviews or some new reviews, but it's because it's something that I like the type of game, not necessarily that I'm going to like the game. So, and we also have the grading system graded out of 10 based on 6 different categories, and we're going to go into those one at a time. And without further ado, we're going to start off. So, Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 5.
5?
So, Parker and I played this about a month ago on PS4, so it was the remaster via online. So we each had the whole screen to play.
Yep.
Which is going to be a very nice thing. Now, it was my second time playing it. I did play it co-op with another friend back in the day when it first came out, and it was.
But you did it split screen?
We did it split screen.
Wow.
Yes, it was.
That sounds brutal.
It was not easy, and it was on. I mean, this sounds like whatever, but it was on a 37 or 42 inch TV, so it was pretty brutal. And those ones, if you guys ever saw it where it's split screen, they kind of cut it into quarters almost, so you're pretty much playing on a quarter of a screen, and that's not.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was. We got used to it, but it was brutal. But Parker, that was your
first time.
First time, and you said
playing Resident Evil at Resident Evil 5. I played Resident Evil 1 and 2 way back when they came out, and I think I played 3, but I think I only beat 1. I think I played 2 and 3, but never actually beat them. And 4, I missed the boat on. I haven't gotten around to it. I have it. I just never. And I know people go on and on about it.
We would have done it already if it was co-op.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, absolutely.
Because that's one of our things that you'll see. A lot of these first reviews you're going to be seeing are Resident Evil games because we went through 5 first, and then we were like, well, let's play some other ones,
Right.
So
co-op.
Co-op on it, right? Co-op.
Exactly.
Because, it's hard to find co-op games anymore.
Yeah, surprisingly.
So it was, I'm very in tune with the series. I've played almost all of them, unfortunately, in many regards. And it was Parker's first one into the new series. Now, before we go into anything, we got to say that Resident Evil before 4 and after 4 are completely different series.
Right.
Still Resident Evil in name, but I mean, it doesn't take a. My dad could walk in and look at the 2 games and be like, "Oh, those are a lot different." Even if you looked at Resident Evil Remake, which also has good graphics, it just is what it is. So we got to take it with a grain of salt that the games after Resident Evil 4 are more likely than not action games. So that's what we got to base.
Not survival horror.
A review on.
Which is what they used to be.
There are very few survival horror games that are made anymore, and if so, they're mostly games like Outlast, which are like... Yeah. I think it's Outlast, right? Yeah, they're like the spooky horror game.
Or like Amnesia.
Or Amnesia, where they're mostly just like, very old school, just jump scares.
You don't get any weapons.
Right. So we're obviously, when we're looking at this, it's an action game with horror aspects. With that all being said, the very first part of our grading system would be story. Now, Parker, you haven't played Resident Evil games before, so I gotta ask you first.
Right.
What'd you think of the story?
I mean, in between on the loading screens, they have these like things that they tell you about the past, and they have like a date, and it would tell you like some story point. And you can go in and like read all of those like in order, and I probably should at some point because like it's like started out in like the 60s or something.
Started in the 60s.
Yeah, so like I remember seeing something like at a date like the 60s, and I'm like, what? And then I'm like, what date is this game supposed to? And it's like, oh, this is like current day. I'm like, oh, okay. But I've always liked the Resident Evil take on everything with with zombies, just that it's like this. Shadow organization company umbrella that's doing all these crazy tests and like I love that the whole idea. Like I was on board way back in the day, and I feel like they've at least kept along the lines of Umbrella being this crazy thing that does crazy stuff and operates outside of. But I will say that 5, there was a lot of storyline wise, there was a lot of stuff about Wesker, and I only casually knew him from the first one, so he definitely became a superhero.
And I mean,
super villain.
Taking in context the game that you played,
right?
Was it cool? Was it silly?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like a little bit sillier than it was cool to see somebody doing all this crazy stuff, but within the context of the game, like it worked. After I got there's so many crazy bosses that like it all worked together. So storyline wise, I think I was like following it. I will say that it was like a little bit like some of the connections of like the character I played as was the girl. I forget her name now. Sheva. Like I can't believe I forgot her name after hearing
that
yell
so much.
But like the connection between her and Chris were like was a little bit like some of the stuff like at this like certain points you it makes you wonder like, wait, why are they still even like doing anything? Like why haven't they just separated and gone their separate ways? You know what I mean? Like there were certain points where like it was like she could have just gone back with her forces, like because she wasn't in whatever group Chris was in. Like she was supposed to be a rendezvous at first, like to like help him in the very beginning, to like help him be like, oh, this is our town, like here's where you're supposed to be. But then like after that, like there was really not much reason for them to be together, but she stuck around, which obviously
I mean it would be like if like a work buddy that you barely know, like you had to go on a long trip with them and you're like, dude, I'm out of stuff to talk about like instantly, and you're like, yeah, do you like sports? No. Cool.
But then it'd be like also then stopping at your respective houses and then continuing on, and it's like, why don't you just leave? Like she's at her home, she could leave at any time.
I mean, clearly they didn't like they didn't dislike each other, but like there was no like chemistry,
right? And they didn't have a history. It wasn't like, oh, you saved my life back in whatever time, like they just met. So like staying together was a little bit odd storyline wise, but. I mean, if we're kind of taking stuff like that with a grain of salt, because otherwise there'd be no game, especially co-op if they weren't together. Then it was good, and I liked the like I liked the outbreak aspect of it, like watching it spread as we were running across the countryside or whatever. because it was like some crazy whatever. But you know.
They do a really good job in terms of the story, in my opinion. I think my favorite part of the story is the beginning. And this happens, there's got to be a term for it, but like there's this thing that always happens in like action movies and stuff like that where stuff spirals out of control. Maybe that's just what you call it. Like you're like, oh wow, like there's going around Africa is cool and stuff like that, and all of a sudden you see like a little bit of like this outbreak, and you're like, cool, and then all of a sudden, and by the way, this goes without saying, there's spoilers and deal with it. It's a review for it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's an old game.
You're and even for new games, by the way.
Right.
So you're fighting Wesker in a volcano at the end, like, and he's like a superhuman fighting you in a volcano.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
like at some point you're like, like something, like I don't know. It wasn't a gradual thing where it's like you know, like in Resident Evil 1, which by the way, but when we're talking story for any Resident Evil game. The original Resident Evil was meant to be a B movie, literally a bad movie made into a game.
Right.
So whenever we're talking about story, we always gonna have a little bit tongue-in-cheek kind of there, where it's like, was it ever meant to be good, or was it ever good?
Right. You know? That's true. So, like if Resident Evil 5 is meant to be like a crazy over-the-top action movie, then I'm on board with the story, because it's not any worse than like any other dumb action movie I've seen, where it's like they don't explain much and they just throw the people into a situation and get them fighting. Like, I mean, whatever premise you need to just start shooting your gun at things is all you really need.
And obviously this is not nearly the major part, major thing that you're looking for in a Resident Evil game, but it does a good job of going, you know, like, why does Chris care? What's Umbrella doing? When you meet Jill, she's like, oh, Jill. And it's one of those things where you could get it, having you not played it before, and you're like, okay, they were partners, whatever, you know.
Well, I mean, I did know Jill.
Okay, right. But even if you wanted to play like the first one,
exactly.
you could be like, I could easily be like, oh, they were partners in Resident Evil 1. Oh, cool, yeah, I can tell, you know, kind of thing.
Right.
So,
yeah, definitely.
I think that they did a pretty decent job. I will say that and we're going to be talking newer Resident Evil games after this. There's always a jumping the shark moment, and this is the jumping the shark moment where if it was the fine line of if you go any crazier or any more over the top, it becomes silly.
Right.
And this is right on it. Like,
yeah.
It was fun. It was silly. Like, there were
right.
times where you were on, like a train, jumping from train to train, and it's like, it's an action movie and it's silly, but we'll talk in a future episode, it can go a little bit too much.
Right.
So, I guess wrapping up story in general, you know, I'm not enthralled with it. You know, it did what it had to do.
Yeah.
I will say that when I give something a 7, it means that it's above average, but not, like, amazing. Right. I would give a 5 being purely average. And I would give Resident Evil story like a 6.5, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we're kind of taking it as the grain of salt of saying, like, it's an action movie, then, like, I thought it was above average for, like, that level of storyline. Do you know what I mean? Like, so right. I would say that 7 works for me, like, because it was intriguing. I did want to know what was happening. I wasn't, like, bored by the story or so confused that I was like, what's happening?
Right.
So in that respect, I liked, you know, I thought it was above average.
They really do a good job of just being right on that line, which is tough to do.
For sure.
So next up we have gameplay. Obviously, this is the meat of how the game acts. And if I would sum it up in 3 words, Resident Evil 5 gameplay, I would say fun but frustrating. It's a fun game. I mean, it is. It's fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun.
I had a lot
Especially
of fun.
now we do have to put the asterisk as we are only talking about playing with another competent player. I don't know anything about how the CPU interacts, whatever. It could be.
I will say, I can talk about this a little bit because when I was playing with you, after we would get done, I would go back and play certain missions because I missed a story thing. So I'll play it with the CPU, and the CPU is fairly competent. In fact, some sections were a lot easier with the CPU than with each other because, like,
the CPU
the stuff
automatically knows what
they know what they're doing, and it's like instantaneous. And it's
know,
like
the game came out originally in like 08 or 09, and that's pretty.
Yeah.
If the CPU's good, that's pretty solid. I highly doubt for this remaster that they were like, let's revamp the CPU.
Right.
I doubt it.
Right. Now, I will say that the one thing that's frustrating CPU-wise is you do have to pay attention to their item management. So you do have to, like, they'll run out of bullets, and then they'll just be standing there running around not doing anything. And it's like, ugh. So you do have to, like, make sure you're, like, taking the correct guns and giving them the correct guns and vice versa. But For the most part, the CPU was good, but personally, I wasn't frustrated by 5 at all. I thought it was fun throughout.
I guess frustrating at points just because it gets difficult,
Right.
and it's more, if you have to put a percentage on it, it's more fun than it is frustrating.
Right.
It's an action game. I just remember there were times where we were like, ugh!
Yeah, no,
the second
for sure.
to last Wesker fight where you have to figure out exactly what to do before the volcano.
Definitely. Figuring out.
Pretty,
Yeah, that's true.
Again, I don't want it to be spoon-fed to me, but I was like, dang, I even did this before, and I couldn't, remember it kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think that, like, it definitely suffered at times from that, where it's like, they're so not spoon-feeding you that you're like, what the heck am I supposed to do? Or, like, at least what order am I supposed to do it in or something? Because you're trying, and then it's like, you just die. And it's just like, there's no rhyme or reason to what... And then when you finally get it, you're like, okay, I guess I see what I was supposed to do.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I never really thought about this before, but Resident Evil, and pretty much any of them, but especially this one, is a very linear game, but they do a pretty good, gosh darn good job of, like, not making it feel that way. Like, yeah, you're pretty much, if you look at it in a timeline, you're, like, pretty much moving left to right. Like, you're never backtracking, because when you finish in an area, everything is dead and everything's on fire, and you're like, oh, don't have to come back there because we exploded the whole town.
Exactly.
But, like, in general, it doesn't feel like, oh my god, I just gotta keep walking, kind of thing. It makes it fresh. You'll come to particular gameplay moments that I really liked. All the bosses are very good.
Yeah,
the big scorpion boss is very neat. The they call him the El Gigante, the big one with the big beard that you shoot with the big machine gun.
Yeah.
It is a lot of fun, and probably my favorite moment in the entire game is either the very beginning, because you have almost nothing and you just have to survive.
It's very exciting.
Very, very exciting. Very, again, frustrating but exciting.
Right. But, like, they presented it in a way that made sense, that you weren't, like, dying so much. Like, there might have been a couple deaths there, but it wasn't like, this is too hard. I don't want to. This isn't Dark Souls.
And that's
not trying to be like,
when you're first starting a game and they're like, just survive. That's very tough. It's so easy to be like, wow, they made this too hard. I have nothing, and they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah, no, it was just enough.
My favorite part, and I think the part that would feel the most horror like too, would be when you enter that village that's kind of submersed in water.
Yeah.
And like everywhere you go is just like knee deep, waist deep water, and like, I mean, it's just like any
game
water you play with water, you're like, you by nature, like, you go in, like, you jump in a lake,
especially
and you're like, what's
Resident Evil games, when there's water, you're like,
Yep, and it's just you never know what's there. I think there's some crocodiles there, and in general, it was a really fun time. They mix it up with vehicles. Like, sometimes you're doing segments where you're automatically driving along. Sometimes you do,
but not driving, which was nice.
Yes,
you are a passenger on a car where you're shooting a gun,
right?
And it's great because you're like, I don't need to drive a car in a Resident Evil game. Like,
and we'll talk about that more later in another one. And they did, in that water part, they I think you actually drive.
There was
boats.
that boat, but it was so like,
it's not cars where you're like ramming into stuff.
Right,
and you
exactly.
die.
It was a big wide open lake. Like, you didn't really have to maneuver in terms of like, like driving a car. It wasn't like going around a track or something. Like, there's games like that spend all their time trying to build a system to drive a car. So whenever they tack it on a game, I'm always like, this sucks.
Yep. And then you have an example like Grand Theft Auto 4 where it should be a major part, but it is like the one thing bringing it down that you're like, dang, dude, they really... Like, I guess that's just the thing. If you're going to have driving in, like, please. Like,
right.
People would be fine if there was no driving in this stuff. So, like I said, in general, it feels like fresh. Like, all the time, it's like, they do a good job of being like, oh, we just had a big encounter, but now it's chill for a second.
Right.
Now here's some items and blah blah blah, and you're not just like constantly like, I'm just constantly dying.
It wasn't, and it also, the bosses weren't constantly quick time events, which I liked. There were some, but it wasn't like so many.
Right.
Like, there was like a couple peppered in, which like made sense. Like when you were fighting those guys on motorcycles with the chains, and it was like getting the thing just right.
Yeah.
And parts of Wesker's fight are like that. But like, then you just fight Wesker. Like in the volcano, you're just shooting him with your gun and you have ammo and you're like paying attention to how much ammo you have left and all that. Which I like I want that in at least most of the boss fights, because like that's the whole point. So if the boss fight comes down to like hitting a button at the right time, it does feel sort of cheap, you know.
Well, and Resident Evil 4, it's probably not the first game to do it, but it is the most famous early game to do quick time events. It is definitely what revolutionized. There's no question.
Right.
Again, games might have done it before, but that was one we were like, oh man, because it was just a perfect mixture of a game that was very popular and a game that did it a decent amount. Take quick time events for what they are. Again, we'll talk in a future episode. I think actually the very next episode we'll talk about all of this stuff we're talking about going bad. One more thing I want to talk about with gameplay real quick, and this was a huge departure for the Resident Evil series. In this particular one, mostly because it's co-op, there is no real pausing. When you're item managing, you are doing it on the fly, which again, I actually, when it first started, I was really against it. Like, I was just like, oh my god. But looking back on it, I think it was a really cool move, because it's just like, you know,
it kept us working together a lot, because I'd pick up stuff and be like, let me give you
and
stuff.
if that's what you want out of the game, co-op, then it's great for that. But if you look like a game like Clock Tower or Silent Hill, great horror games, I can always take myself out of it for a second if I get a little too scared, because they are very scary games. I know that, you know, big internet tough guys, late at night in a cabin. It's like, no. But like you can pause it and just be like, I need a second. You know, okay, let me go watch, you know, cartoons for a second. But this one is like you're scared and there's some crazy stuff going on. It's like, you're not really pausing, dude. If you're pausing, you're dying, you know, kind of thing. Yep. So, especially obviously playing 2 players. So that was huge, and looking back on it, I like it. I thought it made it a little less horror-y, but in reality, because of how they made the game, it made it a little more horror-y.
Yeah.
Added that last part to it. So, gameplay in general, I had a really good time. It's a really fun. I can't think of. It had good item upgrades and stuff you could get. We didn't even upgrade everything, but it's just like you could keep going and just have fun with that. So, I mean, I feel like 8.5, something like that. It was a good time. It was
I would give it an 8 for sure. Like, that was great. That was a good time.
All right, so next we have sound. So this in general, you know, you look at stuff like voice acting and music and the sound effects and stuff. I can't think of anything here.
Music-wise, I don't remember anything.
The voice acting's good.
The
voice acting's good. There's nothing like. There's no. I forget the name of the famous guy who does Nathan Drake. There's no wow, the guy who played Chris is amazing. But they were good. It was, but it also wasn't like low-level Atlas tier, you know, anime game where it's like real bad. So I can't think of anything that really like blares out at me. Like the music, when it's quiet, it's quiet. They don't have music, and that's to their credit.
Or silent even. Like when I remember in that volcano when we first get there, like it was just this big crazy part of crashing, and then it was just like we're there, and like right before Wesker shows up and we have to fight him, like it's just like really quiet, and you just hear like just the rumbling of like stuff. There's no like like there's not, you know.
And something like that can really like ruin a game too if you're just like, oh my god. So I mean, there's not much to say here. Like they did what they need to. They didn't go above and beyond, but I don't know if they need to. So you know, again, if I say 5 is just purely average, I'm giving it a 6.5. Just because it's like it does what it needs to do and no more.
Yeah, I would give it a 5 because there's nothing memorable about it. So there's nothing memorably bad, which would give me a less than 5. But there was nothing memorably good about it either. Like there wasn't I
guess I bumped up a little just because I like when a game realizes it should have silence and just ambience, whereas I've played enough games where you're just like, and again, the next music episode, where you're like music all the time, and you're like, dude, this isn't, like, that's what makes, like, if you were like, how's the music in Clock Tower 1? I'd be like 10. Why? Because 99% of the time, it's nothing, except for maybe, like, a clock clicking, and then there's, it's like, and that's exactly what it should be. If there was, like, music playing all times, be so lame. All right, so 6.5 and 5 on that. So next we have graphics and atmosphere. I put those both together. Mm-hmm. Now we did play on the PS4 one, so it's HD remastered. So we can't compare it to a new age PS4 game. I think they did a great job with. I mean, it like.
Like I said, I didn't play it on the PS3, but like I can't imagine those HD remasters do so much.
They pretty much take them to 1080 and just like clean them up a little
exactly.
bit.
Like it's just skins really and stuff. Like
you can't look at Uncharted 4 and be like, not as good, you know.
Right.
But it's good.
Yeah.
Like it's like
I thought it was great. I mean, I was surprised that it had come out a long time ago, and this was the remaster. Like, I mean, I knew that going in, but like playing it, I was like, wow, this plays like a newish game. Like, I mean, this doesn't play like a game that came out however many years ago. Like, it plays really nicely.
And I think when it comes to graphics and all that, that's the biggest compliment you can give it. Like, this game doesn't feel like, you know.
No, it doesn't feel old.
It's the same thing with like music. If you're like Beatles post Sgt. Pepper and during Sgt. Pepper don't sound like it was created in the 60s.
Right.
That's the best thing you can ever say about that. Whereas you can hear some 1960s music and you're like, 1960, 1960, definitely, you know, disco music, late 70s, got it, you know.
Yep.
So, you know, if you told me that this came out on the PS4, I'd be like, okay, this is pretty good. It's not the best graphics, but it's pretty good.
Right,
you know?
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, you know, you could see where, like, some part of it, you're like, okay, that, but overall, like, it looked great.
And we talked about atmosphere a lot before. Again, going into that is just all the good graphics and like just minor stuff like you would
I think graphics
you would walk into like a place and like there would be like a body like impaled there and you would like see on the side and be like, oh no, like I kind of count that in during the graphics because that's like part of the set and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, definitely. The atmosphere of like these African villages or whatever and towns that were being like taken over was really good. Like especially in the beginning when you get past the part where you're just kind of running and then you get to like there's like a little house and you're there for a minute and there's a guy like with a megaphone just like yelling about like some nonsense and like they're like oh and you're like oh no what's and like it felt like really like
a war-torn Africa
exactly
place. Like
it felt like really well done in that respect, you know, and then you're like oh my gosh. And then one thing that I thought was cool was like when everybody starts turning into zombies and coming after you in that part, if you look around enough, because there's a lot of enemies that are kind of like respawning, but specifically that there is obviously that big giant guy that's, you know, with his big hammer or like big cleaver or whatever. But then there's also the guy with the megaphone like is around and you can find him and kill him. Like he like then is a character that's like running around, which I thought was pretty cool little like thing that they didn't need to do. Like if he wouldn't have been there, I wouldn't have noticed it.
Yeah.
But the fact that he was there, I noticed it and thought that was pretty clever. Like that, like they you know the characters you saw in the cutscene were then there in the actual part. You know what I mean? Like the unique characters at least.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool. Like that definitely got you in the atmosphere of like like this is like this place or whatever. And graphics wise I thought great, and I think graphics are important in a Resident Evil game when there's a lot of enemies that have specific things you have to do. Like that's the one problem, like, you know, with other Resident Evil games when they were like crappier, was that I was like, what am I supposed to be doing here, you know, and it would take me a while to really see it, you know, like, and especially like this is like replaying for the first time an older Resident Evil game where you like you didn't play it at the time. So you're like looking at it through the eyes of like, I look at really good graphics, and then you play like an older game and you're like, what is that supposed to be?
You know, I never really thought about this before, but you brought it up to my mind. This is a horror game where 75% of the game takes place in absolute broad daylight. Right broad daylight.
Exactly.
And it's very scary.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the general meme is like instantly it's like it's dark all the time.
Exactly.
It's raining, it's thundering, whatever. And
right.
It's like,
and like when you're on the tanker,
it.
When you're on the tanker, it's like raining and at night and all that. But like the first, like you said, that long time in the beginning of the game is all broad daylight, and it's made it that much more terrifying.
Yeah. So in general, graphics, the atmosphere, I think they did great. I'd give it an 8.
Yeah, I would give it a 9 actually, because I like that a lot.
Okay, so we're almost through here. The last two, the first one we have is Fun Factor, or as I typed down on my quick note, Fun Factory, which sounds like a great place to go.
Factory.
It's actually it's really boring.
It could be bad. Like it's just like where they make fun, and it's like being there is not fun. what they make, the product they make is fun.
I don't know where you think this is, son. This is a box factory. Okay, so fun factor. We've been over all this stuff before. It's like when we would like try to get our schedules going, and when I didn't have to go to bed at 9 p.m. at night, not because I'm getting up early, just because I'm a weenie. I would be like super excited to get set up for it and play and stuff. And like, what else do you need? Like, what else? Right. It was fun.
No, it was fun. And I think a lot of that has to do with like the co-op aspect, and I don't know why more games don't have good co-op like that, because it's fun. It's always fun.
It's a complete aside, but I've said it over and over again. When someone comes into CIB and says, "What's a good PS4 or Xbox One co-op game?" Literally, the first one I always say is Resident Evil 5, because there are not that many other ones. Like, I can't just be like, "Oh, this one." It's like, It's like, well, that's another great part about this. It's $20 brand new, so it'd be like, dude, you could pick up 2 copies for $40, and you guys could have a good time playing on separate screens on separate PS4s.
Absolutely.
So, not much else to be said. We said most of it. I'm 8.5. I had a great time.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a hard grader. 10 would have to be like all time classic, but 8.5.
Right. Yeah, I would give it an 8. Absolutely. That was really fun.
And the last one I think we went over a little bit as well before, replayability.
Right. I was kind of waiting for this one because I do have a lot more to say than you might about this one.
Okay, and I'll get mine through real quick. Resident Evil 4 was the first to start this type of thing where, like yes, with Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3, you beat it, and you get, like, a new item and, like, whatever, like an infinite rocket launcher. But then, like you went through it and it'd be like, yeah, like, literally a costume. But you go through it again just for, like, fun. just for, like, oh, whatever, I'm
or to see how much better you can do.
Right.
Because there was a grade at the end.
Because you have a grenade launcher that's infinite or whatever.
Right,
but Resident Evil 4 started out where it's like, once you beat it, you're like, dude, I saw that there was this thing that cost $1 million, and like I'm currently at 600,000, and I was never at $1 million, so let's go again. Right. So just in general, this continued on this. Now I only played it through once, but Parker, you have more to say about the replayability. So
when I would play, like there would be certain story points that I would miss, and I'd be like, oh, let me go through and play just replay the level that Spencer and I just played. Just because like Spencer said, it was harder to match up our schedule, so there might be a few days in between our play sessions, and so I'd be like, let me get in there and just get that story point or whatever, because there was a thing where when you would set it up to do co-op, it did a weird thing where you had to get through to the point where you could play it, and then you could add me into the game. So a lot of times I'd miss like the opening cutscene for like a certain chapter or whatever, because you would have to skip past it in order to like get to the part where you could join me into the game.
Okay.
So like that's why I first started replaying it. And I'll say, man, I ended up playing that game probably like 4 times through. Like,
so I mean, you
and I played it through. You and I played it through once, and I probably ended up playing it sum total 4 times through. Like what would happen is I'd play it through a couple times to get a couple of achievements, like that would unlock stuff. But then there was a thing where you would want to buy like an infinite ammo thing or like a better gun, like an upgrade for your gun. And what I did was I found the certain areas that had a really good you could basically just replay certain areas and then quit, and then it would save all the stuff. So it was like really fun. Like there was this one part where they always gave you where they first gave you the Magnum. That was basically like it would also give you a couple of bullets basically, and you could then sell the Magnum that you pick up for some money. So I would like play that part of a mission over and over and over, and like I enjoyed it a lot. Like I never got like bored or felt like I was grinding or that I was tired of it. Like I enjoyed playing it every time. Now obviously I'm sure it wouldn't have lasted much longer. Like once I got the weapon and had it upgraded and had it infinite ammo, I played it a bit like that just because I'm like, this is awesome, not having to reload and da-da-da-da-da. But like I can't imagine that would have lasted for.
We also have to look at the type of game it is. Like, action games really aren't meant to be played a million times. Like,
no.
I beat God of War, and I'm not like, I go through it once, but I'm not gonna be like, I can play this 10 more times. It's not like it's not like Madden where I can boot it up once in a while and just do whatever. It's just it's not meant to be that type of game. So the fact that you could go through 3 or 4 times is like,
I enjoy it
for
a
an
lot.
action game is like phenomenal, because my max is almost always like 2, and usually it peters out after the, you get like halfway through the first one, and you're like, oh, cool, I did it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I enjoyed it too, and I think we replayed it a bit after you got the infinite ammo, just because you were like, oh, I wanted to like get it and then just see it, and then you did, and you're like, okay, like that's good, I'm good, you know. Yeah. And it was fun to go back and play the first part that was so scary.
Yep, and
with the infinite stuff, we
beat the enemies so fast that we had to wait for them to like. There was literally no enemies left, and they were like, just hold out, we'll be there, and we're like, we're good.
Okay,
it's
thanks.
Fine. One other thing I just remembered, and this might only be technically part of the remaster, but they do give you those extra original DLC stuff. The mansion one with Jill, and then the 801, which I don't think we finished because it was really, really hard. I don't think we finished that one, or did we?
We only did there was only a mansion one.
Oh, okay.
801's for 6.
Oh, 801. Okay, okay.
But the mansion one with Chris and Jill was great.
Alone, it was fun. It was, and that was very, very old school Resident Evil.
And it was scary too, because like they introduced that new guy, that dude with the big. What did he have like
hump on his back? I think.
Yeah, and then he had like some big weapon.
Yeah.
And those dudes were creepy. She had to hit him in just the right spot, and it was like whatever. But yeah, and that was cool. They had some co-op stuff where like you would have to throw me to the part, and then I would have to drop a thing down. So there was like some cool co-op stuff as well.
Yep.
But yeah, that one was really fun. I enjoyed that, even just that little like short thing that was like basically a precursor to show the point when like Jill sacrifices herself so that Chris to knock Wesker out of the window or something.
Which did nothing, of course.
Right, yeah, of course, because Wesker's amazing. But...
So, when we're talking about replayability, my score I would give that would be an 8.
Yeah, I would give it a 9.5. Like, that was super... I mean, like I said, I would only give a 10 to a game where I would, like, play it for my whole life. But, like, I would give it a 9.5, though, just because I was happy to replay it over and over and didn't get bored with it. But I'm sure it ended. I mean, I don't feel like playing it now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But there's games like that where I will revisit even now, like, because I'm just like, I love this game.
We had Chris Klemp on for Fallout. I'm guessing like a Fallout 2 for him to be like, I can boot.
Exactly.
Like, hey, you want to boot up Fallout 2? Yeah. Exactly. It doesn't matter the situation.
So that's the 10.
So overall, that's the illustrious 10. So overall, if we're adding everything up, mine came up to a 46 overall, which divided by 6 comes to 7.7. Parker's came to 46.5. Divided by 6 comes to 7.75. I mean, again, if you read a 7.5 in a current game magazine, and again, they don't have 30 minutes to talk, I get it. They don't have 30 minutes to be like, let me write about every single thing that happened. But if you read a 7.5 nowadays, people would come into CIB and say, heard that got kind of bad reviews. If you saw anything less than an 8, you would think, ugh, kind of thing. But again, with us, I think we're both on the same page here. A 5 is merely average. There might be a game I had fun with that ends up getting a 5 overall. It just means it's flawed.
Right.
When you're talking 10, I don't know if anything I would ever give a full 10, but anything in the higher 9s would be literally like the greatest of all time game, where you're like, like, I'm sure Super Mario RPG, if I wrote it all down, would be like 9.5. Who would have thunk it? Kind of thing. So in general, like a high 7s or mid 7s is a very good game. Mm-hmm. Like it's I had a great time. Yeah. I would put under the very good to greatish category, because again, I could see some games that we really like getting something in the 8s, because that's how I feel that this stuff should kind of be graded on, not just giving a 9 for the sake of a 9. Right. Like when you give a 9.5 for replayability, you're like, nah, dude, listen. Yeah,
I replayed it a lot, but I'm not going to give a 9.5 to the story, because I'm like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. So overall, that was Resident Evil 5. I don't want to say an old, a classic that was remastered. It's $20 brand new. It's a great co-op game. You'll have a good time.
Yeah, there's a lot of hours for $20.
I gotta say, next episode, every single word we said is going to be flipped to the negative axis, and we're gonna have a lot of fun with that. So, Thank you guys once again for listening. Thank you, Parker, for once again joining us.
Yep.
And thank you, YouTube
And
land.
thank you.